Welcome to the first video for the Critical Thinking and Problem Solving course. For each section that we cover in this course, there will be a video posted on this YouTube site that we want you to watch before coming to class. By watching these videos before coming to class, you'll get the basic ideas in the section, you'll learn how to work example problems, and you'll be prepared to come to class and work problems similar to the ones that you've seen in the video to gain proficiency and deeper understanding. This first section is called Living in the Media Age. The media age is a good characterization of the age in which we live. It is one where we are constantly seeing things that are trying to persuade us one way or another, and we want to be equipped to understand in depth whether what we're being told is straightforward or whether we're being manipulated in some way. A lot of what we see in the media is not designed to inform us, but is designed to convince us of something that may or may not be true. So we're going to learn in this section and in the subsequent sections of this chapter whether claims being made are valid. We're going to become equipped to see in depth whether claims being made are valid. So we're going to consider everything that we hear as an argument, which is supposed to be a reasoned or thoughtful process. Another definition that we'll have for an argument is that it is a set of assumptions called premises that will be used to support a conclusion. In each argument that we encounter, we will first identify the premises, and then we will determine if the conclusion is valid or if they support the conclusion. So what we're going to do first is we're going to look at fallacies in arguments. Fallacies that an argument that fails to make a compelling case for its conclusion may contain a reasoning error or a fallacy, and we're going to look at 6 or 8 of the common fallacies on the next slides, next blackboards. The first fallacy that we're going to look at is called the appeal to popularity. The appeal to popularity has this form: because many people believe conclusion P is true, that makes it valid that P is true. So let's look at an argument that is invalid because it is of the type of the appeal to popularity type. So we see this ad on the television, maybe in slightly disguised form, but it goes like this: Ford makes the best light trucks in the world. More people drive Ford light trucks than any other brand. This argument actually is in reverse form of a standard argument. A standard argument will have its premises first and then its conclusion second. In this argument, the first sentence right here is actually the conclusion. Ford makes the best light trucks in the world. The premise, the supposedly supporting premise, is more people drive Ford light trucks than any other brand. So let's identify that as the premise. It's okay to put the conclusion before the premise or premises, as long that doesn't make the argument invalid. The argument is valid or true depending on whether the premises support the conclusion. The type of arguments we are looking at in this video and the next, which are invalid because they are fallacies, are arguments where the premises do not support the conclusions. We will look at other types of arguments in the next section called inductive arguments, where we have generally a set of premises, and we will determine whether those set of premises allow us to make a generalization with reasonable certainty or with high probability. That's a different type of argument than we're looking at now, whether the argument is probably true or not. Here we are looking at arguments only that are where the claim is something is definitively true, and we're going to be able to tell with in all of the cases of these fallacies that claim that something is definitively true is not true. So a little bit more about this argument and arguments in general. Here a definitive conclusion is being made. Ford makes the best light trucks in the world. The premise does not support that conclusion because it is an appeal to popularity premise, which makes the argument invalid. That does not mean that it's not possible that Ford makes the best light trucks in the world. It just means that the given information does not allow us to make that conclusion. What we're really trying to do here in presenting these fallacies and arguments is let you see that when we look at an argument, we want to know whether it is convincing or not, whether we should accept it or not. If we're going to decide to buy a light truck, we should look at more than just, is it a popular light truck? We should look at customer satisfaction surveys. We should look at reliability surveys. We, of course, would look at price and we look at other things, but we shouldn't just look at popularity. So we should reject the claim that a vehicle is the best one to purchase just because it's popular. Same with political advertisement. Just because a candidate is the most popular is not a reason to support them. Just because a proposition on a ballot is the most popular one is not a valid reason to support that proposition or to believe that proposition is the best proposition. Now let's look at a second fallacy and argument called the false cause. Let's take a look at this claim being made, or this argument being made. So here is a mock advertisement. I don't think you'd actually see an advertisement quite this obvious, that is quite this obvious an example of false cause, but in more subtle form you see things like this on the television all the time. I placed the crystal on my forehead. Premise 1. 5 minutes later, premise 2, that should be P sub 2, my headache was gone. Conclusion, the crystal makes headaches go away. So false cause arguments have this structure, this form. A comes before B, therefore A cause B. Well, you placed the crystal on your forehead, your headache is gone. You can't conclude that the crystal made your headache go away. Just because A comes before B does not mean conclusively it caused B. It may have caused B, but it certainly is not proven that it caused B. It's an invalid argument. In this case, most likely, it did not cause it. And in all cases, just because something comes before something, most likely does not mean it caused it. Here is a third type of fallacy and argument called the appeal to ignorance. So let's take a look at this statement, which contains an appeal to ignorance type of argument. Scientists have not found any concrete evidence of aliens visiting Earth. Let's assume that premise is true. I think most people would accept that it's true. Therefore, anyone claiming to have seen a UFO must have imagined it. This part right here is the conclusion. Is that a valid conclusion to reach? Well, let's look at the structure of an appeal to ignorance argument below. So the structure of an appeal to ignorance argument is premise. There is no proof that P is true, therefore conclude P is not true. Can we definitively conclude that something is not true just because there is no proof that it is true? No. Could we say something about the likelihood of P occurring? Yes, but that's not what's being done here. We are saying P is definitively not true, and therefore that is a claim that goes too far. So let me make this fine point of distinction here again, this conclusion right here, P is not true, cannot be made if all we have is that there is no proof that it is true. In the next section, we will look at more fine-tuned arguments. What is the likelihood that something is true? And so if we'd made something less of a claim, there is no proof that something is true, therefore we hypothesize that something is not true, that would be okay, but we're not doing that. We cannot definitively say that this thing is not true. So this would be an example of appeal to ignorance. And now let's look at the fourth type that we're going to look at, fourth and final type that we're going to look at on this video. So this fourth type we're looking at on this video is called a hasty generalization. Let's read the argument. 2 cases of leukemia have occurred along a street where high voltage lines run. The power lines cause the leukemia. What is the structure of a hasty generalization fallacy? A hasty generalization can be characterized as saying, or an argument in which A and B are linked in one or more ways, therefore A cause B. So there is, in this case, there's a linkage between high voltage lines and cases of leukemia, but we are not able to conclude that the power lines cause the leukemia. Conclusively conclude that. If we look at this in a more careful way, what could we do that would not be a fallacy? Well, let's say we had conducted a study of a large number of neighborhoods where high voltage lines ran and where they did not run, and where the high voltage lines ran, we had a significantly higher occurrence of leukemia than where the high voltage lines did not run. Then we could make the hypothesis that high voltage lines caused leukemia, and we would set out to prove whether that was true with more studies. But here we are making a definitive conclusion. The power lines cause leukemia. That is a hasty generalization and an invalid argument, a fallacious argument, which is another way of saying an argument that has a fallacy in it. So we have looked at 4 types of fallacies now: the appeal to popularity, the false cause, the appeal to ignorance, and the hasty generalization. These are all fallacies when they're used to give us a definitive conclusion, and so we want to be aware of people, advertisements, political candidates, etc., making these definitive claims that are fallacies of this type. This will conclude this first video on Section 1A. A second video will follow where we will look at 4 or 5 more types of fallacies that occur in arguments.